Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
Have you ever felt so lost in your own life that you forgot who you were? I'm Dr. Sadie Chen, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I had a successful practice as a color therapist, a beautiful apartment overlooking the city, and what everyone called the perfect boyfriend. But perfection, I learned, can be a prison painted in the most deceptive shades. My story begins on a Tuesday morning that felt like any other, yet would become the catalyst for everything that followed. I was standing in my therapy office, watching the morning light filter through my carefully arranged prisms, casting rainbows across the healing space I'd created. Each color had meaning, purpose: red for passion and energy, blue for calm and trust, yellow for joy and clarity. But as I stood there, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt any of those emotions myself. Sadie, are you seriously going to wear that ridiculous crystal around your neck to dinner with my colleagues tonight? Lou's voice cut through my morning meditation like a blade through silk. He stood in my doorway, his expensive suit pressed to perfection, his disapproval radiating from every pore. Dr. Louis Brennan was everything society told me I should want. Successful cardiologist, handsome in that clean-cut magazine cover way, financially secure. But as I touched the rose quartz pendant at my throat, a stone I wore for self-love and emotional healing, I felt only emptiness. It's not ridiculous, Lou, it's part of my practice, my beliefs. Your beliefs? He laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Sadie, you're a medical doctor. This color therapy nonsense might impress the desperate housewives who pay you to tell them what shade of lipstick will fix their marriages, but real doctors, they see right through this charlatan act. The words hit like physical blows. For 3 years, I'd endured this constant erosion of my confidence, this systematic dismantling of everything I'd worked to build. My practice in chromatherapy wasn't just a career, it was my calling. I'd spent years studying how colors affect the human psyche, how different wavelengths of light could trigger healing responses in the brain and body. I had clients who'd overcome depression, anxiety, trauma, all through the careful application of color and light therapy. But Lou saw it as pseudoscience, embarrassing, a phase I needed to outgrow. I won't be able to make dinner tonight, I said quietly, turning away from him to adjust one of my light panels. Mrs. Rodriguez is having a breakthrough with her grief therapy, and I promised her an evening session. The silence behind me stretched like a rubber band about to snap. When Lou finally spoke, his voice was dangerously low. You're choosing your imaginary patients over real networking opportunities again. His footsteps approached, and I felt his presence like a shadow blocking out my carefully calibrated lighting. Sadie, I'm trying to help you become something more than this fantasy healer. My colleagues tonight could refer real patients to you, legitimate cases. I spun around to face him, feeling something crack inside my chest. My patients are real, Lou. Their pain is real. Their healing is real. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean. What I can't see is you wasting your medical degree on crystal waving and mood lighting when you could be making a real difference. His hand shot out, not to hit me, but to gesture dismissively at everything I'd built. This isn't medicine, Sadie. It's make-believe. That night, after Lou left for his dinner, alone and furious, I found myself walking the beach near my apartment building. The moon was full, painting the waves silver and black, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The ocean air filled my lungs, washing away the weight of Lou's words, his constant disapproval, his need to reshape me into someone I wasn't. That's when I saw her. She was kneeling in the sand about 50 yards away, silhouetted against the moonlight, her hands working frantically at something I couldn't make out. As I got closer, I realized she was cleaning, picking up trash, sorting recyclables, working with the focused intensity of someone on a mission. Excuse me, I called out, not wanting to startle her. Are you okay? She looked up, and even in the dim light, I could see paint streaking her face. Her wild curly hair caught up in a messy bun held together with what looked like paintbrushes. She was probably in her early 30s, wearing paint-splattered jeans and a tank top that had seen better days. Oh, hi, sorry, I know this looks weird. She gestured at the growing pile of trash bags around her. I'm Summer, I live in the van over there. She pointed to a weathered Volkswagen bus parked in the beach lot. I've been camping here for a few weeks, and I always clean up before I move on. Leave it better than I found it, you know? Something about her voice, warm, genuine, completely unpretentious, made me want to keep talking. I'm Sadie, and it doesn't look weird at all. It looks responsible, kind. She smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise. Want to help? I've got extra gloves. I looked down at my designer jeans, my silk blouse, my carefully manicured nails. Everything Lou expected me to be. Then I looked at Summer, already back to work, humming softly to herself as she rescued a seagull. From a tangle of fishing line? Yes, I said, accepting the rubber glove she offered. I'd like that. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythm of waves providing a soundtrack to our shared purpose. I found myself stealing glances at her, the way she moved. With unconscious grace, the gentle way she handled even the most disgusting refuse, the soft humming that seemed to make the whole beach feel alive. So, what brings you out here so late? She asked as we filled the last trash bag. I hesitated. The truth felt too raw, too complicated. Just needed some air, some space to think. She nodded as if she understood completely. I get that. Sometimes, the world gets too small, too loud. The ocean helps me remember there's more to everything than what's right in front of me. We sat on a piece of driftwood, watching the waves roll in and out, and for the first time in years, I felt peace settle into my bones. What do you do? I asked. Besides save beaches, I mean. She laughed, and the sound made something flutter. In my chest, I'm an artist, mostly painting, some sculpture. I travel around, selling pieces when I can, doing odd jobs when I can't. She paused, looking out at the water. It's not much by most people's standards, but it's mine, you know? No one telling me what to paint or how to paint it. Just me and the colors. Colors. The word hung between us like a bridge. I work with colors too, I said slowly. Color therapy. I help people heal using different wavelengths of light, different color combinations. Instead of the skepticism I'd grown accustomed to, Summer's eyes lit up with genuine interest. That's incredible. I've always felt like colors have personalities, emotions. Like they're alive somehow. Red is passionate but also angry. Blue is peaceful but sometimes lonely. Yellow is joy but can be overwhelming if there's too much of it. My heart actually skipped. Here was someone who understood, who felt what I felt, who saw what I saw. Exactly, I breathed. Most people think it's pseudoscience, but they've never really looked at a sunset and felt their whole body relax. Or walked into a room painted the wrong shade of green and immediately felt anxious. Summer turned to face me fully. Colors aren't just decoration, they're language. Emotion made visible. We talked until dawn, sharing theories about color psychology, stories about our work, dreams we'd almost given up on. When the sun finally painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, I realized I hadn't thought about Lou once in the past 6 hours. I should go, I said reluctantly, reality creeping back in. I have appointments this morning. Of course. Summer stood and brushed sand from her jeans. Thank you for helping with the cleanup, and for well, for seeing what I see. It's rare to find someone who gets it. I wanted to ask for her number, wanted to suggest coffee, wanted to do something to preserve this unexpected connection. But the weight of my other life, Lou, expectations, the careful image I maintained, pressed down on my shoulders like a lead blanket. Maybe I'll see you around, I said instead, hating how uncertain I sounded. Maybe, she agreed, but her smile told me she hoped so too. I walked back to my apartment as the city woke up around me, sand still clinging to my expensive shoes. The scent of ocean air lingering in my hair. In the elevator mirror, I caught sight of myself and stopped. There was something different in my face. A lightness around my eyes that hadn't been there yesterday. Color in my cheeks that had nothing to do with makeup. I looked at alive. The feeling lasted exactly until I opened my front door and found Lou waiting for me, still dressed in his dinner clothes, fury radiating from every line of his body. Where the hell had you been? He demanded. I came back here at midnight to apologize and you were gone. I've been worried sick. The lie came so easily it frightened me. I couldn't sleep. I went for a walk all night. Sadie, you look like... He studied my face, my clothes, the sand still dusting my sleeves. You look different. Different how? I don't know. More awake. More like yourself. He said it like it was a bad thing. We need to talk about last night. About your priorities. But I was already moving past him toward my bedroom. toward the shower that would wash away the salt and sand, but hopefully leave behind whatever had shifted inside me during those magical hours on the beach. Not now, Lou. I have patience too. See, Sadie, not Mal. The next few weeks fell into a strange rhythm. During the day, I worked with my clients, rediscovering my passion for color therapy through fresh eyes. Mrs. Rodriguez made breakthrough after breakthrough in her grief work, responding beautifully to the soft lavender light I used to promote. Emotional healing. A teenager with severe anxiety found peace in forest green sessions that grounded his scattered energy. A woman recovering from an abusive relationship literally glowed under golden yellow treatments that rebuilt her self-worth. But every evening, I found myself drawn back to the beach, hoping to catch another glimpse of Summer and her weathered van. For 2 weeks, the parking lot remained empty. I began to think she'd moved on, become just another brief encounter in my carefully ordered life. Then, on a Thursday evening, when the sunset painted the sky in shades of coral and amber, I saw the familiar silhouette of the Volkswagen bus. My heart actually raced as I hurried down to the beach. Summer was there, but she wasn't cleaning this time she was painting. An easel was set up in the sand, and she was working on a canvas that seemed to capture the exact colors of the evening sky. But as I got closer, I realized it was more than just a landscape. Somehow, she'd painted emotion into the scene. The way the light hit the water conveyed hope. The way the clouds gathered spoke of transformation. The entire piece seemed to pulse with life and meaning. "That's extraordinary," I said softly, not wanting to break her concentration. She looked up and smiled, a streak of coral paint across her cheek. "Sadie, I was hoping you'd come back." The simple admission made warmth bloom in my chest. "You were?" "Of course. I've been thinking about our conversation, about color therapy and healing." She gestured to her painting. I started wondering, what would happen if we combined what you do with what I do? Art therapy using specific color techniques. The idea hit me like lightning. I'd been trained in traditional color therapy, light boxes, colored filters, carefully controlled environments. But what if healing could be more organic, more creative, more personal? "Could you ... would you show me?" I asked. She cleaned her brush and handed it to me along with a small canvas. "What color calls to you right now? Not what you think you should choose, but what your body is asking for." I closed my eyes and let myself feel, really feel, the tension in my shoulders from another argument with Lou that morning. The exhaustion from constantly defending my life choices. The loneliness that had been growing like a tumor in my chest. When I opened my eyes, I reached for deep blue, ocean blue, the color of peace and depth and infinite possibility. "Good choice," Summer said softly. "Now don't think about technique or outcome. Just let the color move." What happened next was, unlike anything I'd experienced in my carefully controlled therapy sessions, the brush seemed to move by itself, spreading blue across the canvas in waves and swirls that mirrored the ocean beside us. But as I painted, other colors began calling. To me, silver for the moonlight that had brought us together, gold for the warmth I felt in Summer's presence, deep purple for the mystery of what was happening between us. "I don't know what I'm doing," I murmured, but my hands never stopped moving. "You don't need to know. You're healing." "I can see it happening." She was right. With each brushstroke, something inside me was releasing. Tension I didn't even know I was carrying. Fear I'd been swallowing for years. The constant need to be perfect, to be what others expected, to shrink myself to fit into boxes that were never made for me. When I finally stepped back, the canvas held a piece of my soul. It wasn't technically perfect, the perspective was. Off the color mixing amateur, but it was alive in a way that my careful, controlled life wasn't. "How do you feel?" Summer asked. "Like I can breathe?" I whispered. "Like I remember who I used to be." We spent the evening talking about art, about healing, about the intersection of creativity and therapy. Summer told me about her childhood in foster care, how art had saved her from despair, how she'd learned to read people's emotions through the colors they chose, the way they moved their hands when they painted. I told her about my struggle to be taken seriously as a color therapist, about the constant battle to prove that my work had value, about feeling trapped in a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt empty within. "You know what I think?" Summer said as we watched the stars emerge. "I think you're not trapped at all. I think you're choosing to stay in a cage because it feels safer than flying." Her words lodged in my chest like arrows, painful because they were true. It's not that simple, I protested. I have responsibilities, commitments. People depend on me, do they? Or do they depend on the version of you that makes them comfortable? I couldn't answer that. Didn't want to answer that. The breakthrough came 3 weeks later in the most unexpected way possible. I was in my office with a new client, a combat veteran named Marcus who'd been struggling with PTSD. Traditional therapy hadn't worked for him, and his wife had brought him to me as a last resort. We'd been working with green light therapy, colors that promoted balance and growth, and he'd been making slow but steady progress. That's when the earthquake hit. It started as a gentle rolling, the kind of motion that makes you pause and wonder if you imagined it. Then the rolling became shaking, and the shaking became violent lurching that sent my carefully arranged crystals flying and cracked the specially tinted windows I'd spent months selecting. Marcus and I dove under my desk together as the building swayed around us, the sound of breaking glass and creaking metal filling the air. The power went out, plunging us into darkness, broken only by the emergency lighting in the hallway. The shaking seemed to last forever, but it was probably only 30 seconds. When it finally stopped, we stayed huddled together, waiting to see if there would be aftershocks. "Are you okay?" I asked Marcus, my voice shaking almost as much as my hands. "I'm fine, you?" "I think so." I pulled out my phone to check for damage reports, but there was no signal. "We should try to get out of the building." But when we reached my office door, it wouldn't budge. The frame had warped in the quake, trapping us inside. I tried the windows, but they were designed not to open, a safety feature that now felt like a death trap. "Don't panic," Marcus said, his military training kicking in. "Building solid. Someone will come for us." But hours passed with no rescue. The emergency lighting flickered and died, leaving us in complete darkness. My phone battery was dying, and there was still no signal. Worse, I could hear water dripping somewhere in the walls. A pipe had burst, and there was no telling how much structural damage the building had sustained. That's when I heard it. A voice calling my name from somewhere below us. "Sadie, Sadie, are you in there?" Summer, somehow, impossibly, Summer was here. I pounded on the floor and shouted back, "We're here. Second floor, corner office." "The door is stuck. Hold on, I'm coming." What followed was the longest 2 hours of my life. Marcus and I sat in the dark, sharing stories to keep our spirits up while Summer worked with what sounded like a small army of volunteers to clear debris from the stairwells and force open doors. She'd apparently been painting in Thepburg across the street when the earthquake hit and had seen me through my office window just before the shaking started. When they finally got our door open, Summer was the first face I saw in the beam of her flashlight. Paint-streaked and worried, beautiful. In her concern. "Are you hurt?" she asked, reaching for me. "No, but Marcus, I'm fine," he interrupted. "But I want to know who this guardian angel is." In the chaos of evacuation, of checking building stability and accounting for all the tenants, Summer stayed by my side. She drove me home when my car wouldn't start, helped me assess the damage to my apartment, made sure I had food and water and candles for the long night ahead. Lou was out of town at a conference and couldn't get a flight back until the airports reopened. For the first time in our relationship, I was grateful for his absence. "Thank you," I said to Summer as we sat by candlelight in my living room. The city spread out below us like a sea of scattered stars. The power was still out in most neighborhoods, but somehow the darkness felt intimate rather than frightening. "For finding me, for staying." "I was terrified when I saw your building shaking," she admitted. "I kept thinking about all the things I should have said when I had the chance." Something in her tone made my heart race. "What things?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the candle flame between us. "That I think you're extraordinary. That your work matters more than you know. That every time I see you, I remember what hope feels like." The words hung in the air between, juice, fragile and shimmering like soap bubbles. I knew that what I said next would change everything. I could deflect, make a joke, keep us safely in the realm of friendship. Or I could be honest about the feelings that had been growing inside me like wildflowers in untended soil. "Summer," I said quietly, "I think I'm falling in love with you." She looked up then, and in the candlelight, I could see tears glistening in her eyes. "I think I fell in love with you the first night on the beach. When you put on those rubber gloves and helped me clean up trash like it was the most natural thing in the world. What happened next felt as inevitable as sunrise." She reached across the space between us, her fingers tracing the line of my jaw with infinite tenderness. I leaned into her touch, and when she kissed me, it was like coming home to a place I'd never been, but had always been searching for. Her lips were soft and tasted like sea salt and possibilities. Her hands tangled in my hair, and I felt something inside me that had been locked away for years finally break free. This wasn't the careful, controlled affection I shared with Lou. This was fire and lightning and the feeling of diving off a cliff into warm, welcoming water. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. What happens now? I whispered. I don't know, she said honestly, but I want to find out. The earthquake changed everything. Not just the physical damage, though my office would need weeks of repairs, but the emotional landscape of my life. Being trapped in that building, thinking I might die without ever admitting what I really wanted, had shattered something inside me. The careful walls I'd built around my heart, the compromises I'd made to keep peace, the small pieces of myself I traded away for the illusion of security. Lou returned 2 days later, full of concern and relief that quickly turned to suspicion when he saw Summer helping me sort through the damaged items in my office. Who's this? He asked, his tone carefully neutral in that way that meant danger. This is Summer. She's the one who helped rescue me from the building. He extended his hand with professional courtesy, but I could feel him cataloging everything about her. The paint under her fingernails, the thrift store clothes, the easy way she moved through my space like she belonged there. I see. Well, thank you for helping Sadie. I can take over from here. The dismissal was clear, but Summer didn't move. Instead, she looked at me, waiting for my cue. Actually, I said, my voice stronger than I felt, Summer's been helping me develop a new therapy technique, combining art with color therapy. We're going to continue working together. It wasn't entirely a lie. We had been talking about merging our approaches, about the healing potential of creative color work, but I could see at Moo's eyes that he knew there was more to it. Over the next few weeks, as I worked with contractors to rebuild my office, Summer and I spent every day together. We developed treatment protocols that combined traditional color therapy with intuitive art making. We worked with Marcus, whose PTSD symptoms improved dramatically when he could paint his emotions instead of just talking about them. We helped Mrs. Rodriguez create a memorial garden, painting for her deceased husband that allowed her to process grief in completely new ways. The results were extraordinary, but more than that, I was extraordinary when I was with Summer, confident, creative, alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Lou noticed. How could he not? I came home energized instead of drained. I talked excitedly about my work instead of defending it. I wore colors I'd never worn before, deep purples and emerald greens that Somerset brought out the gold flecks in my eyes. The confrontation came on a Tuesday evening in October. I'd just returned from a particularly successful session with a new client, a teenage girl with severe depression who'd shown her first genuine smile in months, while painting with yellow and orange light therapy combinations. We need to talk, Lou said the moment I walked through the door. He was sitting in the living room, still in his scrubs, but there was something formal about his posture that made my stomach clench. About what? About whatever's going on with you and that artist woman. The words hung between us like a challenge. I could lie. I'd gotten good at lying over the past few weeks, creating a careful fiction about late client sessions and research meetings. But sitting there, looking at this man I'd shared 3 years of my life with, I realized I was tired of pretending. Her name is Summer. I don't care what her name is. I care that my girlfriend is having an affair. Is that what you think? This is. What else would I think? You disappear for hours at a time. You come home glowing like you've got some secret. You're different, Sadie. Completely different. He was right. I was different. The question was whether that was something to apologize for or celebrate. Maybe the person I am now is who I've always been, I said quietly. Maybe I just forgot for a while. The person you are now is selfish, irresponsible. You're throwing away everything we've built together for some bohemian fantasy. The word fantasy hit like a slap. How many times had he called my dreams fantasies, my work fantasy, my feelings fantasy? My entire authentic self nothing more than make-believe. What we built, Lou? Or what you built for me? Don't be ridiculous. Everything I've done has been for us, for our future. What future? The one where I give up color therapy and become a real doctor? The one where I stop embarrassing you at dinner parties? The one where I become so small and quiet and acceptable that I disappear entirely? He stood up, pacing to the window, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. I've been patient with this midlife crisis of yours. I'm 32, but it's gone too far. You're acting like a teenager with a crush instead of a professional adult with responsibilities. The contempt in his voice was like acid on an open wound. But underneath my hurt, something else was rising. Anger. Clean, bright anger that felt like sunlight after years of shadow. You want to know what's really happening? I stood up too, facing him across the expensive living room that had never felt like home. I'm remembering what it feels like to be respected, to have someone see my work as valuable, meaningful, to be with someone who builds me up instead of tearing me down, someone who lives in a van and sells finger paintings to tourists, someone who sees colors the way I do, who understands that healing comes in more forms than prescription pads and insurance claims, someone who thinks I'm extraordinary just as I am. The silence that followed was deafening. When Lou finally spoke, his voice was very quiet. Are you sleeping with her? The question deserved honesty. Yes. He closed his eyes like I'd physically struck him. How long? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. A month. Since the earthquake. Jesus, Sadie. He sank back into his chair, suddenly looking older than his 38 years. Do you love her? Another moment of truth. Another chance. To choose courage over comfort? Yes, I do. What followed was the hardest conversation of my life. 3 years of shared history, intertwined finances, mutual friends, professional connections. The practical realities of separation. The emotional archaeology of a relationship that had been dying by inches for longer than either of us wanted to admit. But through it all, even as Lou raged and pleaded and tried to make me feel guilty for choosing happiness over security, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: certainty. This was right. This was necessary. This was the only way forward that honored who I really was. I moved out the next week. Not into Summer's van, though she offered, but into a small apartment across town, closer to my rebuild office. Painted in colors that made me smile just to look at them. Soft sage greens and warm buttery yellows, and one accent wall in the exact shade of ocean blue. I painted that first night on the beach. The transition wasn't easy. Some of Lou's colleagues stopped referring patients to me. A few of my friends took sides, choosing the stable, successful doctor over the woman who'd thrown her life away for a homeless artist. My mother called me weekly to express her disappointment and concern. But for every door that closed, too, more opened. Word spread about our innovative art-based color therapy. Clients came from neighboring cities. Other therapists wanted to learn our techniques. A psychology journal asked us to write an article about our methods. Most importantly, I woke up every morning excited about the day ahead. Excited to see what new colors my clients would choose, what breakthroughs would emerge from their canvases, what healing would happen when creativity and science joined hands. And I woke up excited to see Summer, to share coffee and watch the sunrise, to compare notes on our latest projects, to fall asleep wrapped in her arms, feeling safer and more loved than I'd ever felt in my life. 6 months after the earthquake, we got our biggest breakthrough. A local hospital asked us to pilot a program for pediatric patients undergoing cancer treatment. The idea was to use art-based color therapy to help children process the trauma and fear of their medical treatments. Our first patient was a 7-year-old named Emma who hadn't spoken since her leukemia diagnosis 3 months earlier. Her parents were desperate, her medical team was concerned, and traditional play therapy hadn't made a dent in her selective mutism. I set up my color therapy lights while Summer arranged paints and canvases. We didn't push Emma to talk or participate. We just started painting ourselves, using bright, hopeful colors, creating a landscape of possibility in the sterile hospital room. After an hour of silent observation, Emma reached for a brush. She dipped it in the brightest yellow on the palette and made a single stroke across her canvas. Then another. Then another. What emerged over the next 2 hours was the sun. Not just any sun, but a sun with a face. A sun that was smiling. A sun that took up the entire canvas, radiating warmth and joy and defiant hope. When she finished, Emma looked up at us with paint-streaked cheeks and spoke her first words in months. It's not scared anymore. I had to excuse myself to cry. In the hallway, Summer found me there, tears streaming down my face, and held me until I could breathe again. This is what we're meant to do, I whispered into her shoulder. This is why everything had to fall apart, so we could build something better. That pilot program led to a permanent position at the hospital. Other medical centers heard about our work. Universities invited us to speak. The art-based color, therapy techniques we'd developed, born from a chance, meeting on a beach and nurtured through an earthquake, were changing lives. But the biggest change was in me. I looked in the mirror one morning, getting ready for a presentation at a national psychology conference, and barely recognized the woman staring back, confident, radiant, wearing a dress the color of sunset, because summer had said it made me look like I was glowing from within. This was who I'd always been meant to be. Not Lou's acceptable girlfriend, or my parents' successful daughter, or society's idea of a proper doctor. Just Sadie, authentic, passionate, unashamed Sadie. That evening, after our presentation had been received with standing ovation, Summer and I walked on the beach where we'd first met. The moon was full again, painting silver paths across the water, and I felt the circle of our story completing itself. "I have something to ask you," Summer said, stopping to face me in the moonlight. My heart began to race, but it was good racing. This time, anticipation instead of anxiety. She pulled something from her pocket, not a ring, but a small canvas, no bigger than my palm. On it, she'd painted two figures standing on a beach, surrounded by swirls of color that seemed to dance and flow around them like living light. At the bottom, in her careful script, were the words, "Will you marry me?" I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. The magnitude of what she was offering, not just marriage, but a future built on authenticity and mutual respect and the kind of love that made everything else possible, overwhelmed me. "Yes," I whispered, then louder. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." She lifted me off my feet and spun me around, both of us laughing and crying and glowing with the kind of joy that makes strangers stop and smile. That was 8 months ago. Tomorrow, we're opening our new therapy center, a bright, beautiful space designed specifically for art-based healing. We have a waiting list of clients, a team of therapists we've trained in our methods, and partnerships with hospitals and schools throughout the region. But more than that, we have each other. We have morning coffee and evening walks, and the quiet contentment of two people who've found their place in the world. We have a love built on seeing and celebrating each other's truths, on supporting each other's dreams, on creating something together that's bigger than either of us alone. I think about Lou sometimes, wonder if he's happy with the woman he eventually found, someone more willing to be shaped by his expectations, more comfortable with conventional success. I hope he is. I harbor no resentment, only gratitude for the lessons his limitations taught me about my own worth. I think about the woman I used to be, careful, controlled, constantly apologizing for taking up space. She seems like a stranger now, someone I knew once but can barely remember being. Most of all, I think about colors. How they'd always been my language, but I'd learned to whisper when I should have been singing. How finding summer wasn't just about falling in love, but about falling in love with myself. About remembering that I was never broken, just dimmed, like a light with the rheostat turned too low. Now I burn bright. We both do, and everywhere we go, we light up the world around us, one color at a time. The earthquake didn't just shake the ground beneath my feet. It shook loose everything I thought I knew about love, about success, about what it means to live an authentic life. In the ruins of my carefully constructed existence, I found something infinitely more valuable. The courage to be completely, unapologetically myself. And in Summer's eyes, I found a mirror that reflected back not who I thought I should be, but who I actually was. A woman worth loving, worth celebrating, worth building a beautiful, colorful future alongside. Sometimes the most profound healing happens not in the fixing, but in the breaking open. Not in the controlling, but in the letting go. Not in the dimming of our light to make others comfortable, but in the brave decision to shine as brightly as we were always meant to. This is my story. This is our story. This is what happens when you stop apologizing for your authentic self and start celebrating the masterpiece you were born to be. It's messier than I thought it would be, more complicated, more beautiful. It's painted in every color of the spectrum, and I wouldn't change a single brushstroke.